Session 7 group presentation by Nathaniel Avery, Mandy Hall, and Timothy Prophy. Foundations of the Counseling Profession. The foundations of the counseling profession were laid back thousands of years ago, as the great leaders of religion and philosophy attempted to understand and aid in the human condition. Jesus is among those leaders. Isaiah, prophesying about Jesus in Isaiah 6:9, says, "And he will be called Wonderful Counselor." As counselors, we are called to co-labor with God, demonstrating this aspect of his nature. We are part of an ancient discipline, yet the field as we know it is young. In near history, the social reform and vocational guidance movements in the 19th century, along with testing and the introduction of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, were key factors in developing both the need and what became the infrastructure of the helping professions. As the profession continued to develop into the 20th century, it diversified into a broad range of services that included everything from career counseling to mental health intervention. As a result, in the 1950s, associations were formed to represent and govern the interests of these developing counseling streams. These associations included the American School Counselors Association, the Association for Counselor Education and Supervision, the National Career Development Association, the American Rehabilitation Counseling Association, and the Counseling Association for Humanistic Education and Development. In the 1960s, this was expanded to include the Association for the Assessment in Counseling and Education and the National Employment Counseling Association. The counselor today. Counselors today have the luxury of dedicated training programs through the CACREP accredited curriculums. They can choose to work in settings such as education, community, mental health, inpatient treatment, private practice, spiritual religious counseling, crisis intervention, addiction, and many more areas. More important, as counselors who believe and know Jesus, we have the opportunity to influence the population and places we serve. Matthew 13:33 says, "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough." We can be that yeast in the guidance office, in the crisis clinic, and in the therapy space we are called to serve in.
I was able to sit down with counselor Marjanae Gross-Tiger here in Denver, Colorado, and I was able to ask her about her experience as a counselor, both now but also her previous experiences since finishing her program. One of the things she talked about was working with a diverse group of women in different settings in different places, and some of those places are halfway houses, jail, rehabilitation centers, and now private practice. Marjanae comes from an education background. She originally was a teacher and saw a need in young girls, but then decided to start working with women in counseling. So she went back to school to get her degree in counseling. I asked her if there was anything that she wished she had learned or done differently to make the learning and licensure process better after finishing her program, but she talked really highly of the program she did. She studied at the University of Northern Colorado, getting her master's there in Greeley, Colorado. And she talked about how they really worked with their students to be able to walk them through the process and how it was a very smooth transition from her internship to licensure. And she talked about how they kind of walked each step side by side with them, helping them with getting ready for testing, getting ready for the paperwork that they would need to fill out, and really understanding the process. One of the things she really stressed was to find the right internship for yourself when you're finishing your program. So I asked her what is one thing she'd learned that she did not expect or was not prepared for as it pertains to practicing as an LPC. And she talked about the difference between private practice and doing an internship. She said that she appreciated her internships because she really pushed herself to do something that was challenging, and it was helpful because she was working with a team so people could help her. But on the other side of that, she struggled then with private practice when she was the only person doing that work. So she said one of the things she might recommend is to go ahead and do an internship with private practice if that's what you're going to go into. I asked her what some of the resources were that she used in the licensure process, and she said the biggest thing was the study guide for the National Counselor Examination and CPCE. she said that that book helped her immensely. In fact, she still had it right on her desk or in her office. Then she was able to pull it out and show it to me a little. But she also said one of the biggest things was working together and creating a study group with some of the other students in her class. That was really helpful for her as well, as she went through the licensure process, because they were walking the same path. They were doing the same things alongside her. So having that study group was really helpful for her. They recommended to me in obtaining her license was that she started the process right during her internship. So she was able to still have some help from school, still have some help from some of her classmates, and she found that that was the easiest way to go right after finishing the program. And she said it was important that school kind of walked them through that and helped them along with the process as well. So that was really helpful, and she recommends doing it as quickly as possible if you can. I asked her what theory she most closely aligns with in her practice, and she told me that she uses two theories mostly: client-centered approach and solution-focused therapy, and she kind of blends them together. But she said it really depends on which client what the client needs and how it will help them, and she kind of tailors each session according to her clients and their needs. She said it's very important for her to get to know her clients as well as she can, so that she knows how she can help them best and how they want to be challenged and how they want to work and how they want to move forward. And that's why she uses that client-centered approach especially. One interesting thing that came from this interview is that she didn't know very much about neuroscience in counseling, because that's not something she studied a lot at school. So she said now she's having to go back and learn that on her own, and it is something she's really working on and has been interested in, and how to put that into her practice and how that works alongside with therapy. So she's really interested in learning more about it and really interested in furthering her education. When it comes to continuity of care, she talked about it being different in each different areas she's worked in. When she's worked in rehabilitation centers, there were policies and procedures that you followed. You kept with whatever the company asked them to do. The same with the jail system. And in her own private practice, she said one of the biggest things is she just tries to be consistent with her code of ethics and how that's going to help the client move forward, and that she just wants to treat people as people. So she has, in her own private practice now, come together with some of her own policies and procedures, and she feels it's most important to remain consistent in everything that she's doing. Marjane stressed how much networks play a part of her role in treatment of her clients, and how one of the biggest things she's done is, since leaving school, is sort of taken a group of people and having them to be able to call on when she needs them. If she needs them for referrals, if she needs them because someone's moving out of state or out of town. She knows a bunch of people from her program, but also just from meeting people at different events, and how she will keep their cards, keep their information so she can use them as referrals. She also said, important quote I thought, she said, "No counselor is a superhero. There will be areas where you need additional support, whether it's through your supervisor or even referrals." Again, she talked about having a group, a network group that she can call on, that she can work with, and that they can work with her as well. So knowing Marjane, I know that she's a strong Christian, and I asked her how easy it was to work with her faith in her practice. And one of the things she told me is that she absolutely tells people right away that she's a Christian and she can offer prayer if they want prayer, but she really lets each client lead what they want. She's worked with a variety of different clients, some who do want prayer and some who don't. And she said one of the things, though, is that she knows that she can intercede on their behalf either way outside of a session if needed. But she has stressed that it's so important to make sure that the client is comfortable. And if the client comes to her for Christian counseling, then she is able to offer that. But if the client would not like that, that's okay too. I asked her what advice she would give to people who are looking to become licensed counselors, and one of the things she said was find an internship or practicum where you can be challenged. She emphasized that it's important to do hard things right away so that you know what you're getting into, but also you're working with a team who can support you. And she also emphasized again about her network group and making sure to stay connected to people who studied with you.
The education requirements for becoming a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado is fairly straightforward and easy to understand. However, it is important to do your homework and research ahead of time before joining a program to ensure that the program you are joining specifically prepares you to apply for the license in the area of field that you intend to study. So the general requirement for the majority of counseling professions is a graduate degree or a doctorate degree in the specific field of counseling that you intend to practice. So for example, marriage and family therapist, a school counselor, clinical counseling, substance abuse counseling. And as you see listed here, a licensed professional counselor should have a master's or a doctorate degree from a CACREP or a equivalent program. A marriage and family therapist should have a master's or doctorate from a COMFT or equivalent program. And a licensed addiction counselor should have a clinical master's or doctorate. Now, on the licensed professional counselor and marriage and family therapist, they have specific accredited programs that must be followed, and it says or equivalent. And so the important thing to take note of is that if you are not part of those programs, accredited programs, then you have to submit your program, basically a program evaluation, to the Center for Credential and Education, or the CCE, and they will evaluate your work and exam requirements and evaluate whether or not you meet the requirements of the accredited program. So it's very important to make sure that you are aware of that before you start your program, to ensure that you don't have to go back or potentially risk applying for that and not having your work accepted and having to go back to school to complete the missing requirements. There are many benefits to joining an association, a counseling association, as a licensed counselor in the state of Colorado. And just a few examples are the Colorado Counseling Association, or the CCA. It's a branch of the American Counseling Association, the ACA, and this group supports individuals working in counseling-related fields through advocacy and annual events. The Colorado School Counselor Association, the CSCA, is a professional organization with over 1,500 members that provides job postings, professional development opportunities, and an annual conference for networking and sharing best practices. A third example would be the Colorado Association for Psychotherapists, or the CAP, is an association that represents the interest of all professions providing psychotherapy services in Colorado, such as counselors, through public education and legislative advocacy campaigns. So it's important to do your research and understand that joining some of these associations will allow you to network within your practice area in your field, in addition to receiving educational benefits, continuing education opportunities at reduced or no cost, and again, the opportunity to network and even apply for jobs that are only specifically posted within the association membership areas. So also memberships are kind of the larger umbrella of that. And as I mentioned before, the American Counseling Association is a nationwide organization that does provide continuing education. There's an annual conference, provides various levels of membership ranging from student to retired counselor. They also provide continuing posted magazines and publishing that pertain to your field, and in order to be able to stay current on the most recent trends and research, and even potentially legislation that would impact the way that you practice counseling and therapy. So the subgroup of the American Counseling Association would be the Colorado Counseling Association, or the CCA. What's unique about the Colorado Counseling Association is that there are several subscriptions that are available. So subscriptions for counselors in private practice, or multicultural counseling and development, counselor education and supervision, even LGBT issues in counseling. And so a wide range of essentially furthering education and again, being a part, receiving publications and training and networking within some of these subgroups of counseling practices. Another important aspect of counseling and something to ensure that you are researching and that you are familiar with is the concept of ethics within the counseling profession. And so there are 5 core professional values of the counseling profession. Number 1 is enhancing human development throughout the lifespan. Number 2 is honoring diversity and embracing a multicultural approach in support of the worth, dignity, potential, and uniqueness of people within their social and cultural contexts. Number 3 is promoting social justice. Number 4 is safeguarding the integrity of the counselor-client relationship. And number 5 is practicing in a competent and ethical manner. So again, those are 5 core values of the counseling profession. And in addition to that, the ACA has the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics, which is a several multi-page PDF document, again, that was produced in 2014 and is available on the ACA website for review. And so that stands as an overarching code of ethics that counseling professionals should be familiar with and practice within those guidelines. In addition to the ACA's overall code of ethics, within some of the memberships and associations that we just discussed, there are also code of ethics for those various memberships and associations. So it's important to be very familiar with the ACA code of ethics and that document, the 2014 document, in addition to the core values that we went through there. But it's also important that any membership or association that you become a part of, that you make sure to research and become familiar with that before you join, to make sure that there's no moral conflict with anything that they're requiring of their counselors, but also to ensure that you are knowledgeable of that before you begin practicing and potentially putting yourself or your client at risk.
Licensing requirements. In most states, in the 3 states represented in our group, which are Colorado, Connecticut, and Florida, graduating from a CACREP accredited master's degree program in clinical counseling will meet the educational requirements for licensure. But what is CACREP? CACREP is the Council for Accreditation for Counseling and Education Programs. This is an accreditation council that provides for consistent educational requirements. According to CACREP, there are 8 core curricular areas in the CACREP standard applicable to all programs regardless of specialization. Specializations can include like addiction counseling and clinical mental health counseling or school counseling. These core curriculum are professional counseling, orientation and ethical practice, which is the class we're in right now, social and cultural diversity, human growth and development, career development, counseling and helping relationships, group counseling and group work, assessment and testing, and research and program evaluation. There are also specialization-specific curricula standards within CACREP. Practicum and internship. In addition to acquiring a specified master's degree, all states require documented practicum, internships, and postgraduate supervision hours. Those requirements differ from state to state. For example, in Connecticut, there are 100 hours of practicum required, and there are 600 hours of internship. Yet in Florida, there is the equivalent of at least 700 hours of university-sponsored supervised clinical practicum, internship, or field experience. That includes at least 280 hours of direct client services, which means in Florida, some who have significant documented field experience would not be required a practicum or an internship. Post-graduation, licensure, and beyond. Post-graduation will most certainly consist of post-graduation experience under supervision. In Connecticut, that experience consists of 3,000 hours including a minimum of 100 hours of direct professional supervision performed over a period of not less than 2 years. In Florida, postgraduate supervision consists of at least 100 hours of supervision in no less than 100 weeks. Of those, also 1,500 hours of face-to-face psychotherapy with clients and 1 hour of supervision every 2 weeks. In all 3 states, after the specific requirements are met, the prospective licensee must pass the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling Examination. Upon passing, the license is obtained by turning in all the documents, verifying the requirements are met, along with the licensing fee. In all states, the renewal consists of paying a yearly renewal fee. It also consists of maintaining continuing education credits. To maintain the license in Connecticut, the licensee must obtain 15 continuing education credits yearly with specific focus areas included. In Florida, the licensee must obtain at least 25 continuing education credits yearly with specific focus areas. And our references.